rotate your phone. You can't turn your phone while recording. Oh, girl, I should turn that on. Hello, guys. Hi. I'm Teresa. You guys know me really well, and this is my daughter, Sarah. And as promised, we are going to talk to you guys tonight about grief from a sibling's perspective. So I'm going to just open it up, and Sarah's going to share with you. You know, in the beginning, Sarah shared with us how God had prepared her for this time. And little did we know that God had placed on her heart a way to prepare to help all of us. And so I want Sarah to share her perspective from that tonight. So Sarah, why don't you go ahead and just begin and tell us what's on your heart.
All right. Well, thank you, Mom, for having me on. And I am glad to be here tonight, not under the circumstances, but just Mom's mission is to help people and not to waste this pain. So that's what we're here to do. So I'm going to start off with, so the day my brother died, I was on maternity leave. My baby was 6 weeks old, and I was actually at my workplace, as I was a teacher, extending my maternity leave. And the story I'm going to tell tonight goes back about a year from there. But that day, I was actually honestly pretty bitter. I don't know if I would say bitter, but I was not happy about extending my maternity leave, which was crazy because with my first baby, I would have done anything to stay home and not go back to work because I just wanted to be with her. And the thought of daycare was so hard for me to accept. And so the situation we were in is my husband was about to finish residency. He's an anesthesiologist, and he had a year left at that point, I guess about 9-10 months. And the way it works is you interview a year in advance. And so we had just accepted a position right before I had Sadie, October 18th. He had just accepted a position in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And it was a relief. I was also sad, but it meant I wasn't going to be teaching. It was too much transition, and that was going to be it. My last year, my 10th year at Parkwood, and I loved my job. While it was very stressful, I loved it. And I did not want to end my 10 years of teaching on maternity leave. But I could not find childcare. I could not find childcare anywhere. Mom still works full-time. Dad works full-time. We were on wait list while I was pregnant, and childcare is hard to find around here, but I could not find it. So really the only choice was to extend our maternity leave, and I felt okay about it, but I was sad. So the day I was extending it, Mom calls me. I actually ignored her call repeatedly because I was with the principal. And that whole day occurred, and it all started to make sense. And so really, I believe that God was working, preparing my heart well before that day. And I don't know why. I don't really know that Mom feels that her heart was prepared in any way to lose Andrew, but for some reason, I do feel like God kind of laid a path for me to be as prepared as one can be to lose a sibling. And so I'm going to take you back to December 2017. And I distinctly remember I started listening to the Nothing is Wasted podcast, which is a podcast hosted by Davey Blackburn. Now, when his son was a baby, which Emma, my oldest, who's now 6, and his son was a baby, his wife was murdered in their home while he was at the gym and his baby was asleep. I was oddly fascinated with this story. I read the news reports. This was well before December 2017, but I read the news reports. I couldn't believe it happened. It hit so close to home. Weston, their son, was very similar in age to Emma. And it was just so traumatic, and it broke my heart, and I didn't even know them. Well, fast forward to December 2017, and I found his podcast, and it's called Nothing is Wasted. And it's about a lot of tragedy, people experiencing tragedy. And I distinctly remember I was in the Lowe's parking lot waiting on Danny. It was right around Christmas time, and I was listening to a podcast about a man who had walked into his home, and I won't go into all the details, but his wife and daughter had been murdered, and he found them. Murdered by a disgruntled employee. And this man was being interviewed well after that happened. And it made such an impression on me. He still loved the Lord. He wasn't moving on, but he was moving forward with his life, honoring his daughter and wife so well, but also explaining how he made it through this traumatic life experience. And it broke my heart. It was encouraging. I distinctly remember that one. And there was another one, Brittany and Daniel Brooker. And they're married, but they're both widowed. And so I just fell into these stories of these people's lives. And specifically about Brittany and Daniel, they remarried each other. Or they married each other, so their second marriage. But they honor their first wife and husband so well. And it's nothing of this world. And so I was so intrigued by that. And I follow Brittany pretty closely on Instagram. She talked a lot about grief. She talked a lot about resources and things to help people that are grieving. And then finally, Davey Blackburn remarried one of my friends from college, Christy, and Andrew actually knew her too. And so I kind of followed their story all along. So the day Andrew died, the first thing I thought about was that podcast, because never in my life did I think I was going to be one of these people. But here I was. My brother was killed in a plane crash. I mean, I never in a million years, not one time, thought that he would die in a plane crash. I've thought about my parents dying before. I have never thought about my brother dying, ever. And here we are in this situation, and the first thing that popped in my mind was this podcast and what we could do to get through this.
And I wanted to interject here too, because just to kind of give everybody an idea of what was happening in your current life, Andrew and Erica Andrew had interviewed in December, and they had moved here, but they lived with you.
Yeah,
they lived with you and Daniel for when did they move in?
I believe they moved in with us around in February. Andrew was actually training, so he was gone at least half the time they lived with us. And Erica was back and forth between Chicago during that time as well. But they lived with us for a short little bit before they closed on their home in Jeffersonville.
Yeah.
So I really felt this odd thing that God had prepared my heart. A girl I'd worked with, her brother had died. I reached out to her that day. So I just started reaching out to people as a resource. And so that's kind of the first part of my story, which I felt God heavily. I didn't understand it, but I eventually saw it as a blessing that I was exposed to this. I watched these people closely. I watched how they grieved. I saw the resources they had. I had resources for myself, and I had books that I started ordering off of Brittany Brooker's recommendation. And so not only had I been following these people, this podcast, I'm now on an extended maternity leave that I did not want, oddly. And it's too many things in place to not be orchestrated by God.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the podcast, Sarah, as she shared with you guys, has also been something that I've also benefited from that. And then you can share maybe about how you guys had spent some time with Davey and Christy.
Yeah. So me and Erica, Davey and Christy, I reached out to him the day Andrew died, and Christy, I don't know if she texted me or called me that night and said, we'll be there tomorrow. And I said, no, we're going to be together as a family, but thank you, but I do want to talk to you. So we kind of touched back and forth throughout the following months, and then they actually invited us to their home. Erica and I went, and Jack and Soph came too, and we were just able to spend some time with them. And I do want to share one story that Davey shared with us. And so it's the story of Lazarus. And so if you know the story well, Mary and Martha called for Jesus because Lazarus was dying, and Jesus did not get there in time, and Lazarus died. And so when Jesus came to them, it says Jesus wept. So Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Jesus knew that he was taking too long to perform a miracle before he died. And Davy said he didn't weep because of the news. He knew the news. He wept because he loves us deeply. He saw their hurt. He saw their pain, and he wept with them. And that really resonated with me because I never felt abandoned by God when Andrew died. I truly didn't. As weird as that sounds, that seems to be a pretty normal reaction, but I didn't. I felt his presence heavily from the very beginning, and that story really resonated with me.
Yeah. Well, and tell us, so you can tell by Sarah's story that she's a caregiver. And I've shared with you guys before in our some of my times with you how Sarah took care of our family because she felt called to do that, and she took care of me and Tony, and she also took care of Erica. But if you could maybe share a little bit how you managed your own grief in losing your only sibling. You know, I've shared with you guys before, we grew up in the country, and there weren't playmates out there in the country, so they only had each other and the great outdoors, and they spent a lot of time together. And so if you feel like it, could you just share a little bit how you managed your own grief of losing your brother?
Well, first off, I want to say I was there for my family. I did not solely take care of everyone. My parents have attended Northside since we attended in middle school and high school, and then I went away to college, and when I got married, I attended Southeast with Danny. And then the weekend of the accident, we started going to Northside, and we continued to go there until we moved to E-Town. But the people in our lives, the church family, lifelong friends, I mean, everyone came out of the woodwork. I'll never forget the day it all happened. It was, the door literally just opened and closed in my parents' house all day. Just people dropping things off and leaving. I would look up and the counter would be full of more food, and people traveled and came and to be with us, and it was the love and support we felt was second to none. So very thankful for that.
Yes.
But to answer her question, I was on maternity leave, so back to that. And so when I would drop Emma off at preschool, she was 4 at the time, I would have like 6 hours to be with Sadie, who was 6 weeks old at the time, and just be. And one piece of advice that I have is to feel it, to grieve, and to go through it. The only way to get through it is to go through it. And so I would come home every day. I would read my Bible. I would sit on the couch in silence. I would listen to worship music. I would cry. I would just be still. And I feel like during those times that I was definitely closest to God than I've ever been. I felt very near to him. But I was able to have that alone time for weeks because Sadie was so little. She needed to be fed and put down for a nap, basically. So I had a lot of time reading about heaven, a lot of time seeking out God's word on questions I had, a lot of time to read books and devotionals. And so I feel like I was grieving in that way. And then also with Danny at home, he was a great support. His schedule was a little crazy, but at night we would spend time together when the girls were in bed and just talk and process through things. And so if I had been working, I don't even know how all of that would have looked. After a few weeks, I think it was after Christmas, I started going to Erica's house a lot, and I would spend a lot of time with her during the day. And just grieve together as a family. Grieve alone, grieve together. Just walk through it and help your children grieve. I mean, it's all uncharted territory that literally you can only take a day at a time, and sometimes an hour at a time, and sometimes a minute at a time, because it's so overwhelming. You don't have all the answers, and you just have to surrender and lean into God and lean into each other and just get through it. So that, I feel like that's how I was able to grieve, is the time that I had a lot of time on my hands, more than I've ever had before. And I truly think that was orchestrated by God. So,
and I shared with you guys before how we felt like God, when he brought, in my story, I share about how I felt like God brought us all together so that we could be together and grieve together as a family. And how God prepared Sarah's heart, because I'll never forget, one day I opened up the door and there was a devotion book laying there, and I had no idea who sent it, and Sarah had sent it. And is that one of the books that you said Brittany had recommended? It was called the Hope Devotion Book. And I will tell you, out of all the books that I had in the beginning, that was one of the most powerful ones for me. It was written by a lady who has lost 2 children to a rare genetic disorder called Zellweger's. But it has a daily reading, and it was her journey of grief. And I will say that God definitely used that for me. I mean, literally, that book didn't leave my side. If I left the house, it went with me. That's just how much comfort it brought me. And Sarah is the one who introduced me to that book from some of her preparation. So,
yeah, which again is because I listened to the Nothing Is Wasted podcast, where I heard about Brittany, and she said, if there's one thing you do, one thing you buy, for someone that is grieving, this is it. And so I ordered it. I'm pretty sure I watched a lot of her highlights because I knew it was fresh in my mind. Another person, because of Brittany Brooker, that I learned about is Rachel Faulkner Brown. And she's actually the founder of a widow's, I don't know if it's just a widow's retreat, but it's called Never Alone. And she's actually lost 2 husbands. One, I believe, was a heart condition, and then another one was a pilot in a plane crash, which was crazy. When I read that, I was just dumbfounded. And through her, I found out about an organization called Never Alone, and was able to give Erica's name to her, and Erica was able to go to this retreat in Tennessee. And so many things have lined up and been orchestrated by God. And it's like, I could tell you so many more. There's so many things that I could see unfolding that were, the groundwork was laid well before the day Andrew died. The last thing, Mom, though, I do want to share is just that throughout the whole time, I was just reading and praying and being still before God. And like I said, I felt the closest I've ever felt to him is I really felt heavily, perspective kept coming up, perspective. And so, I think that your perspective is heavily dependent on whether you're going to have a very bitter heart or a very grateful heart. And so, when I was grieving, it's like I could look at it as I've lost my only sibling. I only had 8 months with him in the same state since college. I only got to see him once a week or so, sometimes more than that. I only, and look at all of the negatives, what I was missing. My niece and nephew no longer have an earthly father. My sister-in-law does not have her husband. My sister-in-law can't have more children that she wanted dearly with my brother. My daughter, when I told Emma that Andrew died, she said, who's going to be Aunt Erica's prince now? And so I could look at all the things that were missing from my life, which there was a place for that. Or I could look at all the things that God allowed to happen before my brother died. And so God was so gracious. My brother moved home. He didn't have to do that. If my brother had lived in Ohio when this happened, I wouldn't have seen him once a week or 8 months. I wouldn't have had family dinners with him. We wouldn't have trick-or-treated together and done the things that we do with our families day to day. Because when you live out of state, those things don't happen. If I had the perspective of my brother lived with me. We had late night talks and in the kitchen, but after the kids went to bed, and we got some very sweet time together. The day before my brother died, he came to my house and ate chili and danced with us and watched funny videos. And we FaceTimed Erica and the kids, and all of these special things happened because God allowed it to. It didn't have to happen that way. It could have been different. And so if I choose to have the perspective of God has been gracious to me and God has allowed all of these things, and I believe even orchestrated these things so that I could have precious time with my brother, or I can view it as God ripped my life apart. So I obviously don't believe God ripped my life apart. He did allow for my brother to die. And I don't think I'll ever understand that until I get to heaven. But I think perspective is huge. We are going, Andrew is in heaven. I am here. This is the life I have to live. Am I going to waste this pain and be bitter and angry? Or am I going to let God use it? I would have never chosen that. I don't want this life of being without my brother, but it is my life. So I have to make that choice. And I feel like God just pointed that out to me over and over and over. And when I started finding all the reasons to be grateful, I feel that my attitude, my heart, everything was in a better place.
Well, and I'd like for you to speak to someone maybe that is listening or is going to listen in the future, if they are walking in your shoes, what would be your advice to someone who is in the very beginning, like we were, of that intense grief? And you've already kind of pointed that out a little bit, the things that you focused on, but what's one thing that you could tell somebody that's walked in our shoes, if they're walking through that right now, if they've lost a family member, what would you say to them? What would be a resource or something that you feel like, because like you mentioned before, you focus on the next thing because that's all you have the strength to do, is to focus on the next thing. So what would you say to somebody in those shoes?
I would find someone that has had similar loss to you and reach out to them, talk to them, watch their journey if you're able to, like I did on Instagram. Find people, with social media. I would say find someone with a similar story that can help you. Let people love you. Let people show Jesus' love to you. I have a hard time. I tend to go to, I can handle it. I can do it. Let me handle it. I don't need help. But people were like, can we set up a meal train for you? Yes. Can we pray for you? Yes. Can we, anything people offered to do, we said yes. Because I wanted to let people love us. We needed it. We needed it. Let Jesus love you through his people. And then the last thing I would say is, as hard as it is, you have to walk through the grief. And so whatever that looks like for you, minute to minute, hour to hour, you have to face it. I remember after Andrew died, at 2 a.m, we didn't sleep for, it seemed like ever, until your eyes just shut and your body shut down. And I was just going through, trying to find every picture, pulling out my old laptop that's half the screen is cracked, to find any piece, screenshotting every text he's ever sent me because it'll eventually delete all these things. And I remember I just looked at pictures and pictures and pictures, and Danny was like, why are you doing this? I would just be up all night looking at these pictures, and I was like, I want to remember. It's hard and it hurts, but I want to remember. And so I would just encourage you. I mean, it still hurts, clearly, but you have to walk through it. In order to be healthy, you have to walk through it. And it's not easy, and no one has the guidebook, but I would say cling to Jesus and cling to your family. Cling to those closest to you.
I so agree, and I'm so thankful that as a family, God has brought us close, and I'm so thankful for Sarah and her insight, because I was not capable of seeing anything through any type of perspective when we were going through this. So I'm so thankful that God did, in His way, He prepared us as a family, because He prepared Sarah. So thank you, Sarah. Is there anything else on your mind and heart that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think the only thing I want to say is the whole reason Mom is doing her blog, these lives, any of this is so that people have someone to relate to. So people, we can share. All we have to share is our story. That's all we have to share is our story and what God's done for us. And if you are experiencing something, reach out. Whether you feel led to reach out to us or reach out to someone who has experienced something similar, because for me, that was huge. That was huge.
And I would agree with that, because I was desperate to find someone that was in my shoes, that had walked the grief path that I walked. And while I had many people support me, and many people, that have lost children reached out to me, and that was very much a comfort, I still was so desperate to have somebody kind of illuminate the path for me, so that I knew that I was going to make it. Mm-hmm. And I hope that listening to Sarah tonight, especially if you're a sibling and you've recently had loss, our prayer is that listening to something Sarah said may resonate with you. Even if it's just one thing, to give you enough strength to get to the next day. So thanks for spending some time with us guys tonight. And maybe if Sarah would like, we can do a second interview, because I think her insight is so valuable, and we're so very thankful for that. So I guess that's all, unless you... Okay.
Thanks for having me on, Mom.
All right. Until next time. Bye-bye.